Hey everybody, here I am at 9 p.m. I am looking at a Japanese children's storybook from 1968 and I'm trying to get it properly translated. What could drive a 34-year-old man to be up at 9 p.m. trying to read a Japanese picture book from 1968? Well, what could drive me to do that is all of you have been so stupid it infuriates me. What in particular were you stupid about this time? Yasuke was a samurai. I made a video a few days ago where I kind of went over the Yasuke thing, and I didn't really talk about Assassin's Creed that much because I don't care about Assassin's Creed. This video is not going to be about Assassin's Creed, unfortunately, due to the culture war that I seem to be now partaking in. Yasuke's credentials as a samurai are now being called into question. Unfortunately, here's the blunt truth. Yasuke was a samurai. Yasuke has been called the samurai for a very, very, very long time at this point. And the problem here is all of you are allowing this stupid culture war to now call into question the validity of a character who had nothing to do with it, who lived in the 1500s, in fact, who has nothing to do with any of this, who was just a cool historical note of a dude, a black slave who served as a samurai in Japan for 1 year. It was just a cool fact. People just like talking about it. Japanese people, in fact, seem to like talking about it a lot. And yet, despite this, people seem to be repeatedly saying that no, he wasn't a samurai. Obviously, who do I trust on whether or not someone is a samurai? Do I trust the Japanese? No, of course not. I trust random people from like America, I guess. I mean, those are obviously the definitive sources on who was or was not a samurai in the 1500s. So what am I going to be doing in this video? I'm going to be talking about a couple things. One, we're going to be showing Yasuke was a samurai, and everyone is being very childish and very stupid. We're going to establish 3 different facts. Japanese media talks about Yasuke a lot, and they call him a samurai basically every single time. 2, Yasuke is mentioned many times in many sources. Many historical figures are mentioned once, maybe twice. Yasuke seems to get mentioned 7+ times at the very least confirmed, with many more that haven't been translated from Japanese. See, a lot of this information is in Japanese and can't be properly translated to American. It's a little bit difficult for many of us to now go over this. See, historically, what often happens is the Japanese people will say, our sources say this, and generally historians, if someone is reputable, will go, okay, I shouldn't say will go. I'm not a historian. I just liked this story. This was a cool little story. And here I am, angry, because y'all are ruining this story and you're ruining how cool this is by being stupid. So, lastly, we're going to painfully go over historical sources and facts to defend this. There was a Reddit post that kind of inspired me to go over this, going painfully and slowly over many different sources that, well, I'm going to now go over. So, you guys now have to deal with that, unfortunately. So, let's start. And before I go into this too far, let's remember everything we're going to be going over is from the 1500s. I say that going forward here because unfortunately, this is the 1500s, and unfortunately, there will be many words that I can't say, and I will not say, but will potentially be listed on your screen. With that in mind, if you don't like reading depictions from people of black slaves in the 1500s, if that is the sort of thing that might make you uncomfortable, then we gotta go. So let's start. Yasuke in popular history. It is now 1968. That's right, 1968. That's how far back this goes. Yasuke is mentioned in a Japanese children's story. Now there is an English translation here, but unfortunately, as we can all understand, and I hope you guys understand, translations aren't perfect, especially for picture books from 1968 that might not even exist anymore, so they probably didn't hire their A-team. In addition, the story here is a children's story. A lot here is omitted, a lot here is not talked about, and a lot here is dumbed down. With that in mind, let's go over this. This is the beginning of Yasuke in popular history, 1968, unless people think that the 60s were too woke, in which case I wonder about your sanity. In fact, here's a question for you. If you truly believe that the 1960s were too woke in Japan, just go ahead and leave. Just stop watching because you're so stupid. I don't want to waste your time. Just go watch another video where someone just angrily rants and doesn't actually go over anything. See me? Here's the thing. And I promise you, I have actually done this. Me, when I, in my spare time, what do? What could drive a 34-year-old man to go crazy? You guys being stupid all the time. See, what I actually do in my spare time is I go over the Wikipedia article on Yasuke. Do I read the story? Yes, because it's cool. Then I go over the sources. Here's the problem with Wikipedia sources on Yasuke. They're actually really bad. And I mean, the sources on Yasuke are really bad. See, I clicked almost all of these to try to find information on what they were sourcing. Almost all of them are terrible. In fact, a lot of them are not really sources that you should really be sourcing. Does that make his story wrong? No, but unfortunately, it does mean that a lot of holes have now been opened up as people go through this stuff and as people talk about these different things. Unfortunately, yes, a lot of people have noticed that a lot of these sources are really not great. But me, I went to all of them, and I'm translating Japanese articles from 2 decades ago trying to read this. So what could drive a man to do this? You guys ruining a cool thing. So let's read this plot summary, okay? And again, I assure you guys, this is from 1960s Japan. This is the tip of the iceberg, so some of this might start to offend you a little bit more. Okay. In the late 16th century, when Oda Nobunaga is holding sway over Japan, a young black man is sent to Nobunaga as a gift from a missionary. Japanese people at the time do not know about black people, and they are very surprised. The young man is named Kurusan Yasuke, or Kurosuke, and is made an attendant of Nobunaga. Kurosuke is cheerful and hardworking. He follows Nobunaga's willful riding and performs tricks when he is asked. Nobunaga and the household members come to be fond of him. Kurosuke used to be a slave, and he knows no other way to survive than to meet other people's expectations and work hard. When Akichi Mitsuhaide, I will butcher every Japanese word, I apologize, attacks Nobunaga at Hinnoji Temple, Kurosuke fights bravely. Nobunaga kills himself and Kurosuke is saved and sent to Namban Temple. Okay, the following, I assure you, what happened here is the Japanese looked at German's children's stories and they said, could we get worse than that? Could we actually be more messed up than that? And the answer is surprisingly yes. When he sleeps that night, he dreams of his parents in Africa. Kurosuke cries silently. So, the children's story depicts a slave who gets to be a free man for a year, who is then sent back to being a slave, whose last moments are him sleeping, dreaming of his parents in Africa, and crying. I'm sorry, that's so messed up. I just don't know what to do than laugh. That's wild, Japan, but okay. Okay. Now, remember, this is a Japanese translated summary of a book from the 60s. A lot was actually left out here. The book is actually very anti-colonial and is pro-African. It talks a lot about the about the European colonization of Africa and how that's bad. It's not all summarized here, okay? The idea of a black man working for Nobunaga is quite unique. Kurosuke's efforts as a man of Nobunaga is a bit odd and humorous, and his fate is painful. Yeah, a little bit. The mind of a young man in a foreign country is well described. Lively characters and the settings in Azuki, where European cultures could be seen, are attractive too. Illustrations by Miroda Genjiro enrich the world of this story. Kurosuke was praised for its originality and high quality when it received the Japanese Association of Writers for Children's Prize in 1969. So let me just be clear. This is the beginning. I don't know how long this video is going to be. This might be a while, okay? But I want to set a base floor here, okay? 1968, Yasuke is being talked about in Japanese culture. This is not a new trend. Many of you seem to think that this is some new trend, that, oh my god, it's the darn Americans are forcing it on the Japanese. No, in fact, the complete opposite is true. Yasuke has been popular and being talked about in Japan for a long time, and particularly in the last decade gets talked about a lot more. We're not talking about Assassin's Creed here. I assure you, I'm not going to mention it. He's being depicted, I think off the top of my head, he's being depicted in, I think, 3 different ongoing mangas as of now. He's been depicted in many mangas in the past. He had an anime entirely centered on him made. Let's just say he's a popular dude. How popular is he? Well, I decided to click through many different articles on Yasuke. These are all Japanese articles. How can you tell that they're Japanese? We can actually see that these are Japanese websites. .japan, this one's .com, .japan, So there's 2.com and all of them about Japan. What I'm saying here is Japanese entertainment news and Japanese media as a whole likes to talk about Yasuke. What do they like to call him, in fact? Let's go ahead and translate this. Kirin Kagura features the Black Samurai. Oh, that's interesting. I wonder what these people call him. Hold on, I have to... Okay, this one actually was like... Okay, I might have to skip this one. I don't have time to go over that. Okay, what does this one call him? This one calls him the Black Servant who served him. That's fine. Okay, you know, you win some, you lose some. That one's just part 2 of that article. What does this one call him? Who is Yasuke, the Black Warlord? He's more. In fact, this has more truth to it than you might think. By the way, shockingly, the Black Warlord. But okay, let's go on to this one. What does this one call him? Okay, here we have Yasuke, Japan's first Black Samurai. Interesting. So this one, what does this one call him then? What was the life of Yasuke, the Black Samurai who served Oda Nobunaga? That's interesting too. Once again, I assure you, this is Huffington Post Japan, okay? This is the Japanese wrote this. This is not an American, this was written in Japan. Japan itself wrote this. People working in Japan, people serving in Japan did this, okay? I just want that to be clear. So let's talk about this article real quick, because this is the last article before I go over this Reddit post, okay? But what does this article say? Many of these things, unfortunately, I'm just using Google Translate, okay? But many of these things, unfortunately, have not been translated properly to English. In fact, here's something that will be very frustrating for you going forward. When the missionaries left Japan, some of their journals were left in Japan. Those journals are in Japan. They've been translated to Japanese, but many of them aren't actually available online for anyone to read. There are paywalls. There are lots of issues with trying to access them. Can I access them? No. In fact, one journal would cost me $40 to access, which is crazy. But what we can do is we can see English translated to Japanese, translated back to English here, as well as some Japanese sources that they talk about in this. So let's talk about these. The following records remain in reports from the Japanese side and from the Society of Jesus. So this is from the Japanese side. A black man came from the Christian country. He seemed to be about 26 to 27 years old. They didn't really know how old he was. He seemed to have been somewhere about 17 or 27. They frequently... The Japanese couldn't seem to get a figure on that. His whole body was black like a cow. The man was healthy and strong and looked like he could defeat a force of 10 men. The missionaries brought him and had to greet Lord Nobunaga. So that is from Ota Yushiki. Now, just to be clear, most historical figures are mentioned like once, twice, 3 times would be good. We could start to compare. Yasuke is mentioned a lot by many different sources, despite only being in Japan for a year. That is insane. Just to be clear, that doesn't really happen, okay? This is very abnormal. This is an abnormal amount of mentions for this character. I have to be clear on that. The fact that he existed is 100% guaranteed. The fact that he served Nobunaga is 100% guaranteed. In fact, the fact that he had payment from Nobunaga, as well as carried Nobunaga's equipment, which is more of a big deal than you might think, and had his own sword, that is guaranteed as well. Multiple sources have talked about that. If one source says something, we generally accept it. If 2 sources say something, it's pretty much guaranteed. If like 3 sources, if 3 different people are writing about something, that's pretty much a sure thing. When people are now arguing against like 7 goddamn sources talking about Yasuke, you're being a bit stupid. Nobunaga also wanted to see a black slave, so the missionary Organtino took him there, but Nobunaga refused to believe that the color was natural and not painted later, and had him strip off the obi and upper garments off. Blah, 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 blah. Let's go over another diary. And remember, these are diaries that I know I'm using Google Translate, so this isn't perfect, okay? I assure you. This isn't perfect, but this is Google Translate, and this is the best we can do because many of these are literally not in English. Lord Nobunaga was accompanied by a black man who had been given to him by the missionaries and whom he employed. He was thick as ink and 6'2", approximately 1 meter 82 centimeters tall. His name was Yasuke. Just to be clear, this would mean that Yasuke was like 2 feet taller than your average person at this time. Okay, maybe not 2 feet, maybe like 1.5 feet. This dude was big. Okay, this is talked about a lot. While the exact measurements are probably off, this dude towered over people. He was a very large man. This is accounted for multiple times. Taking all this into account, it is believed that Nobunaga employed a black slave introduced by Organtino as a samurai and given the name Yasuke. His name isn't actually Organtino, but this is the translate being a bit weird, so don't call that. Let's go over some more sources here. Frois recalled the black slave understood a little Japanese. So this is a missionary, and this is a missionary writing again about Yasuke. And I cannot emphasize this enough. This dude gets written about a bizarre amount of time in 1 year. It's abnormal. The black slave understood a little Japanese, so Nobunaga never tired of talking with him. He was also strong and had some talent, so Nobunaga was very pleased and took him under his wing, and had him roam around the city of Kyoto with people accompanying him. Some even speculated that Nobunaga might make him a Tono, a military commander. So the Black Warlord, by the way, has more historical precedent than you think. The fact that a random missionary was actually speculating that he might be a military commander actually has more historical proof than you might believe. So let's talk about this for a second, okay? Now this is a missionary who wrote about this situation. Nobunaga was allowed to roam the city, Nobunaga allowed Yasuke to roam the city. Yasuke was talking to Nobunaga. Who was Nobunaga? This would have been the most powerful man in Japan at this time. This dude was talking to the most powerful man in Japan at this time. This is abnormal. This is not something that just happens, okay? And I can't emphasize that enough. The people that are downplaying him and saying he's just some random slave, oh, he was just some random dude who carried around his equipment. No, you wouldn't. Why would they do that? That doesn't make sense. That's stupid. You're just being stupid and stupid. It's so nonsensical to think that it just blows my mind. Okay. Furthermore, in the version of Nobunaga Koki called this is being poorly translated. This is the history of Nobunaga that has been written. The history of Nobunaga, and I this is not an exaggeration. The actual history of Nobunaga as written in Japanese, the Japanese history of Nobunaga writes down and has in it passages on Yasuke. What do these passages say? This is Google translated. There's an actual definition here. Where is it? Here's the actual translation. This black man called Yasuke. In fact, let me read through here. Since the last time I posted about this, I went to track down the entry of Yasuke in the Maeda clan version of the Shin Chokoki. Kaneko Hiruki, professor, I'll look this up. Just so you guys, I already looked this up. So let me go look this dude up. This dude is a real person. He does exist. You can Google it. There's not a picture. Name, Kaneko Hiruki. Degree, PhD. Let me be clear. This dude has a PhD. Occupation, professor. Affiliation, Historiographical Institute. Specialty, Japanese history. Research themes, research of historical materials in the Azuki Momoyama period. That's about where Yasuke was. In fact, it directly covers the year that Yasuke was there. Okay, keywords related to research themes, medieval history, study of historical materials. I want this to be clear. This dude exists. This is a very, very high-ranking dude. He is a professor at the Historiographical Institute of the University of Tokyo, the most prestigious historical research institute in Japan. This man includes his book in his book below, and this is paired with the translation in Thomas Lockie's book. So we have one of the most prestigious historians in Japan being translated by an American historian, or at the very least, I think it's a British historian living in Japan. He translates, this black man called Yasuke, and this is written in the history of Nobunaga. The history of Nobunaga writes this down about Yasuke, okay? This is a big deal. This black man called Yasuke was given a stipend, a private residence, etc., and was given a short sword with decorative sheath. He is sometimes seen in the role of weapon bearer. That's a bigger deal than you're thinking. He did not just carry around the weapons like some squire. Carrying around Nobunaga's sword would be a big deal. A very big deal. Okay. So that's the actual translation of this. Yasuke is believed to have been from Mozambique. Some people dispute that, but there was one writing that said he was from Mozambique. Anyone from Mozambique, apparently you're winning right now, but he might not have been from Mozambique. Okay. Even after Nobunaga's death, Yasuke rushed to Nijo Castle, where Nobunaga's son, Oda Nobutada, was holed up and fought bravely, brandishing his sword, but eventually surrendered. Once again, this is going to be a bit racist, but after the death of Nobunaga, a black slave sent by the inspector went to his son's house and fought for a long time. Akichi's retainer approached him and said, "Don't be afraid, hand over your sword." So Akichi handed him the sword. When the retainer asked Akichi how to dispose of the black slave, Akichi replied, "Because the black slave is an animal and does not know anything and he is not Japanese, do not kill him, but place him in the chapel." He says Indian, but basically the translation here is they're going to go and they're going to give him back to the missionaries. So the idea here, he did fight. After he fought, he did somehow escape. I think he escaped somehow. We don't know how, because that's, you know, kind of the issue of history. We don't know everything. He escaped from when Nobunaga died. He went to Nobunaga's son. He fought to keep Nobunaga's son alive, but because this was a mass betrayal and the entire family was being murdered, one man can't do that much. I'll talk more about him being on Nobunaga's side, because that's way a bigger deal than you morons want to admit. So basically, the Japanese officer, the person who has executed now this plan, is racist and says, "I'm not going to kill him. He's not even Japanese. It's not even worth it." And there we go. So that is reevaluation of him as a black samurai in the world of subculture. Although Yasuke disappeared from the world of history, he began to be reevaluated in the world of subculture after the 20th century. Now remember, this is a Japanese article. I've Google translated. Some of this won't be exactly perfect, but it's the best we can do. He was featured as a protagonist in the children's book Kurosuke, published by Yoshio Kurusu in 1968, and was a model for the protagonist in blah, 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 and he was a model there. He was depicted very poorly in this novel. He was kind of satirized. He was not depicted fondly, but you know, not everyone's a winner. Blah, 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 blah. He's been depicted a lot here, okay? So, everybody get that? Now let's talk about this for a second. We're going to talk about this thread. Okay, so, we're gonna have to go into a lot of historical data here. So the fun part is over. We're now going over a lot of historical data here. Ever since previously, people have been arguing with me. Now this is a dude who's compiled all this history. Okay, I don't take credit for this. This was someone else. This was their doing. They did a lot of good work. I didn't do that work. Okay. Ever since previously, people have been arguing with me that stipend could be given to anyone, not just samurai, without considering the word's meaning in Japanese. I've already mentioned how the word was used in Japanese history. Let's look then specifically at how Otagyuchi, the author of the Chronicles, used it. Here are other entries that mention the word stipend, specifically, and then these two things, each with a link to the exact page in the Shincho Koki. I will also quote the translation by J.P. Lammers. So this time the translation is academically published. Okay, just to be clear, I'm going to skip over to here. These are now academic translations of this. Why are we doing this? Because we are trying to compare the stipend given to Yasuke to the stipend given to other people. If other samurai were given the same stipend as Yasuke, then it means that this merits that, yes, he was a samurai. If he's using the same letters of the same stipend given to other samurai, then it only stands to reason that, well, in addition to all the other historical evidence we have here, if he's being given a samurai stipend, he's a samurai. So let's talk about this. Lord Boy the Younger fled from his fishing spot on the river to Nagoya, dressed only in a bathrobe, to call on Nobunaga's help. Accordingly, Nobunaga assigned him a stipend sufficient to maintain a retinue of 200 men and installed him in the Tanobo Temple. To be clear, what he's saying here, Yasuke received the same stipend as a man who, quote, had a retinue of 200 men and was installed in the Tanobo Temple. Does it sound like a dude who is merely some slave? Does it sound like a dude who is merely holding the equipment in the back? If he's being given the same stipend as a dude with 200 men, that's pretty good. Okay. In this story, he does clarify here. Recent research suggests the story is inaccurate, but I'm just demonstrating how Otagyuchi uses the word. So Otagyuchi is the one who wrote this story, but recent history did suggest that this story wasn't true. But if he's using the words in the same way, it stands to reason that if the words are being used in the same way, if a samurai stipend is being given to multiple people and Yasuke is among them, then obviously if he keeps using the same words in the same way, he's being given a samurai stipend. So let's talk. Do you think this guy's a samurai? The original family name of Saito Yamashiro Dosen was Matsunami. He was a native of the western hills of the Yamashiro province. One year, he left the Kyoto area for the provinces and called on the help of Nagai Tazaemon of Mino, who granted him a stipend and assigned auxiliaries to him. Once again, we have another character who has been given soldiers. We don't know how many, but in this story, this man was given a stipend, and he was given soldiers. We now have two characters who have direct soldiers under them being given the same payment that was given to Yasuke. Nobunaga remonstrating Ashiga Yoshiaki in 1573 for not giving out stipend properly. This is pretty long here, but okay. You have failed to make appropriate awards to a number of lords who have attended you faithfully and have never been remiss about their loyal service to you. Instead, you have awarded stipends to newcomers with nothing much to their credit. That being so, the distinction between loyal and disloyal becomes irrelevant. In people's opinion, this is improper. So he's talking about a stipend, once again, payment for lords who have attended him faithfully. Okay? So let's be clear. We are now being compared to people with soldiers, more people with soldiers, and literally lords. And this is the same stipend that was given to Yasuke. Okay? Men who have given you steadfast and blameless service but have not been awarded a stipend by you find themselves in dire need in Kyoto. They turn to Nobunaga with a heavy heart. If I were to say a few words on their behalf, they assumed, then surely you would take pity on them. On the one hand, I felt sorry for them. On the other, I thought it would be in the interest of the public authority. So I put the matter of their stipends before you, but you did not assent in even one case. Your hard-heartedness, excessive as it is, puts me out of countenance before these men. I refer to the likes of Kanze, Yazimon, a bunch of names here. So what he's basically saying, this guy, Nobunaga, is saying that these people might need money and he's not giving them proper money. These lords are not being paid. Lords are not being paid. So he has a guy below him. Those guys below the guy aren't being paid. The people running the land aren't being paid. This is, again, just to be clear, this is on the same level that Yasuke is being put on with these words, okay? A samurai captured in 1573 who would rather die than submit to Nobunaga. When Kanimaki, on being questioned by Nobunaga, gave a rough account of his career, Nobunaga commented that it would be a shame to lose a man with such marvelous accomplishments to his credit, and stated that his life would be spared were he to pledge his loyal service to Nobunaga. To this, Kanimaki replied that he had harbored a deep grudge against the Asakura for a long time. Now that so many warriors of standing have been killed, however, he could not permit himself to stay alive by giving vent to his resentment. The moment he was remiss in his loyal service, Nobunaga would surely think that whatever he might have said at this juncture was just an expedient to save his skin and cancel his stipend. Once again, we have a literal samurai, called a samurai, who Nobunaga is offering a stipend, the same stipend being offered to Yasuke with the same words. Then Kanimaki would be unable to live with himself and with what people would say about him. He would therefore cut his own belly now. Having made this plea, he took his own life. His heroism was unprecedented. His glory was beyond dispute. So we have a dude with 200 troops, a dude with some amount of troops, literally the lords of the land, and a actual samurai being given the same stipend as Yasuke. And people are still doubting this. It's crazy when you think about it. It keeps going. It keeps going. Nobunaga to his own command. And by the way, just to be clear, I want to go back here, and I have looked at these. I can't really read it, unfortunately, because, see, unfortunately, this. So if you guys find a way for me to read this, although they are translated by academical sources, but we do have this. So cool. All of these are sourced. All of these, I can click on all of these. And if I could read Japanese, which I can't, but if I could translate it for myself and I could verify, aha, they're being truthful, which is a lot more than what you guys are saying. Nobunaga to his own companions, think of Alexander's foot and horse companions, in 1575 because he was feeling generous that day and just given a bunch of cloth to a beggar, and then felt like also rewarding his men who were supposedly moved to tears by the former act of generosity. So here he is addressing his most loyal and close soldiers, his companions. Okay, Alexander's companions were his close riding, his soldiers, right? To be clear, these are his loyal soldiers that he is addressing. Okay, all of Nobunaga's companions, those as high as of low rank, also shed tears. Each and every one of his companions had his stipend increased. So we are being compared. The closest soldiers to Nobunaga have the same stipend that Yasuke had. Boy, this is starting to sound conclusive. And it goes without saying that they felt fortunate and thankful. It is because Nobunaga was so compassionate ever and felt that the heavens shed their blessings upon him and that the fortunes of his house would long endure. I'm going to keep going because you're not bored of this. Hopefully not. Otherwise, you're probably going to click away from this video. But I am interested in this sort of stuff, so I'm going to keep going. Kuki Yoshitaka and Takigawa Kazumasu I sorry if I'm butchering this, I'm doing my best, in 1578 for building big ships. Nobunaga summoned Kuki Umi no Ju and presented him with 20 pieces of gold as well as 10 garments and 2 boxes containing wild duck. In addition, Nobunaga rewarded Kuki Uma no Jo and Takikawa II with stipends adequate to maintaining 1,000 men each. The same stipend that Yasuke is getting. 1,000 men. 1,000 men. The same stipend Yasuke is getting. Okay, I don't want to say anything, but this is starting to be like a 17-0 blowout right now. A young samurai in 1579 for being a good wrestler, since Nobunaga loves wrestling. This is interesting. Once again, another samurai who, let's read, is he gonna get the same stipend Yasuke got? A man from Koka whose name was Tomo Shirin, some 18 or 19 years old, showed good skills and scored 7 wins. The next day too, Nobunaga put on sumo matches and Tomo again outclassed the others. As a result, Nobunaga selected Tomo to become his stipendary. At about that time, Nobunaga had to take disciplinary measures against a gunsmith by the name of Yoshiro, whom he locked in a cage. Now Tomo Shorin received the private residence, household goods, and other possessions of this Yoshiro. Nobunaga also gave him an estate of 100 koki, a sword and a dagger with gold-encrusted sheaths, a lined silk garment, and a horse with a complete set of gear. Glorious recognition for Tomo. Do you guys understand the point going on here? What this guy is doing is he's comparing the stipend that Yasuke got to all these people. And every time we compare them, what are we getting? We're getting a consistent comparison, are we not? The same words used in the same way being used with these people as well as on Yasuke. As part of his order preparing for his soon-to-be conquests in 1582, Nobunaga ordered his vassals to hire good local samurai. Interesting. Treat the provincial samurai with courtesy. For all that, never be remiss in your vigilance. When the top man is greedy, his retainees do not get enough. Upon succeeding to domains, apportion them all your retainers and take new men into your service. Should there be any men from your home province who wish to enter your service, investigate their provenance, contact their previous employers, and then grant them a stipend. Interesting. The same stipend being given. Interesting. By the way, this word, he wasn't a samurai, he was a retainer. And I'm just sitting here like, are you guys serious? Do you know anything? Because what the hell are you talking about right now? But you know, I got so many messages like this, and it just ticked me off, dude. That's why I'm doing this, because you guys just annoyed the crap out of me. How many times did I hear, Thor's? Yeah, how many Thor's do you have? You know there's a book written about this, right? Like, you know there's a whole ass book that has been written about this that you guys refuse to read, in English, mind you. In fact, here, let me go see if I can, let me see, what is the book called? Here we go. Right here, peer-reviewed, African Samurai, the true story of Yasuke, a legendary black warrior in feudal Japan. Made in 2019, unless you think 2019 was super woke. There was another story from 2014, another story from 2007. I can go over all of them. In fact, do you really want me to? I'll even go over the racist accounts. What is the point here? You could read this. It is dramatic. It is trying to be a bit extra, mind you. But, you know, what are you going to do? So Otaguchi used the word from time to time, and it was not a one-off usage. Every single usage of the word stipend by Otaguchi was, without exception, either giving it to a samurai, some of whom were incredibly high-ranked, or used in the context of hiring samurai, or samurai's salary. This usage includes a young sumo wrestler who may or may not have been a samurai, but was definitely hired by Nobunaga as his personal samurai. There is therefore no reason to think Yuichi was using the term in Yasuke's context any differently. What he's saying here is that he used the term stipend for samurai the same exact way every single time, okay? And he also used it on Yasuke. In fact, we might even draw a slight parallel to Tomo Shorin. Yasuke was said to have had the strength of 10 men, meaning he must have demonstrated that strength, and it's certainly possible he demonstrated it through wrestling and beating everyone. Nobunaga loved wrestling, loved exotic stuff, and as shown above, loved to demonstrate his generosity. So it would certainly make sense on meeting Yasuke, coincidentally at Hanoji, for Nobunaga to give Yasuke, who was exotic and might have been good at wrestling, a samurai stipend, a decorated sword, and a residence. Incidentally, Tomo Shorin was also at Hanoji when Akechi Mitsuhide attacked, though unlike Yasuke, he did not survive. So we have a very similar character here. We have a character who impressed Nobunaga, who was given a samurai stipend, who nobody questions was a samurai, and was at the exact same place that Yasuke was at, being a samurai, like Yasuke. Let's go on here. The meaning of the word stipend is not supposed to prove Yasuke was a samurai all by itself. What proves Yasuke was a samurai is not he received a samurai stipend, but that he received a samurai stipend and carried Nobunaga's weapons, which was the job of a samurai, and had fought with a katana at Nijo, and he was mobilized and followed Nobunaga on the Takeda campaign of 1582, and remained by Nobunaga's side even after Nobunaga dismissed all his ordinary soldiers. I want to talk about this for a real second. We need to go over here real quick. Yes, I understand. Sources within sources. We're going to get really annoying with this one. Okay. Nobunaga was coming back from his final campaign against the Takeda, who were also the final one of his life, when he was received by Matsudaira Latada, and who noted Yasuke with Nobunaga in his diary. Another character who talked about Yasuke. Let me be clear here. There is absolutely no reason that anyone would be talking about this dude this much unless he was just like weirdly high tier for some reason, which he was. Why was Yasuke so high tier? We don't know. We just don't have enough historical proof, but it's basically like everyone's journal talks about something they describe as a dinosaur, and there's like 7 people all saying they saw something, and in all those descriptions it's all a dinosaur, and then you're saying maybe it was an ostrich. Nobunaga left Azuki on Tensho, blah, 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 blah. Nobunaga issued the following order. Lord Nobunaga intended, after leaving Suwa, to have a look around the base of Mount Fuji and to make a tour of Sarugi and Totomi on the way back to the capital. So he ordered, send the ordinary soldiers home from here. Only unit leaders shall accompany me. Then he gave the troops leave to go home from Suwa. What do you think that means for a second? Only unit leaders shall accompany me. This black warlord theory starts to actually have a little bit more merit. Ironically, he might, in this whole discussion about Yasuke and all this information getting brought up, it's starting to be suspected that he might have been more, in fact, than just a samurai. But let's continue. The common soldiers departed the next day, meaning everyone left with Nobunaga were samurai, and with some standing at that. So not only were these ordinary samurai, these were like the high-ranking samurai. Nobunaga, meanwhile, moved to Kofu, and sights saw along the way. So I don't know. These are dates. He entered Saruga on blah, 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 and Totomi on blah, blah, blah. On this date, Nobunaga arrived at Hamamatsu and issued the following order. Once there, he gave all of his pages and horse guards leave to go home ahead of him, either by way of Hanzaka or by way of Imagir, whichever they preferred. Only his archers and harquebusers remained behind his company. So he's moving again, he's moving again, he's moving again. By Matsudara Latada's diary, this is another dude. By the way, I kid you not, this is another dude who's talking about Yasuke. This is another Japanese dude who's mentioning Yasuke in their diary that we have. And when I say seven historical documents, there are much more than 7. We just don't have them all translated, unfortunately. After the Kai campaign, he was busy building a tea house at Ubaguchi to receive Nobunaga, which he did on that date, matching the entry into Shinchokoki. Afterwards, Latada seems to have headed for his home at Fukozu, traveling faster than Nobunaga's party, reaching Hamamatsu at that date and arriving at Fukozu at that date. His entry on Yasuke was made on this date. So what does this entry mean? This guy's compiled all these dates and he showed all of this, okay? The fact that he's mentioning Yasuke on this date, and this is important. I know I haven't been mentioning them because I can't really understand it properly. I don't read Japanese. After Nobunaga dismisses all his regular troops, after Nobunaga dismisses everyone except his high-ranking officers, he literally only has high-ranking people with him at this point. Lasada's entry shows Yasuke was mobilized and went to Nobunaga on the Takeda campaign of 1582. However, he did not fight. Note, I don't use the word fight except at Hinoji Niji, as the disparity of the forces were so great, the fighting was essentially over by the time Nobunaga entered enemy territories, and the rest of his campaign was spent mopping up by other contingents, dividing the spoils, and sightseeing. So why isn't Yasuke written to have fought and done all this? Okay. Because the campaign was over. They'd basically destroyed the enemy forces and they were just taking over the land. So some people might say that Yasuke didn't do personal fighting, but he was still with... And by the way, just to be clear, all these people who keep seeing Yasuke with Nobunaga, to be clear, he is next to the most powerful man in Japan in all these different sightseeings, okay? This dude is like Bigfoot. Everyone has seen him and everyone is writing about him, and for some reason he is always next to Nobunaga. Throughout this entire year he's in Nobunaga's service, he's always there. He's always being written about. He's always next to this dude, okay? And people keep talking about him as if he's kind of a big deal. Why would you just mention some random dude? You can say, oh, it's because he was black and they wanted to make a note of it, but that's not even what the notes were about. They keep saying, oh shit, Yasuke's there again. Also interesting, by the timeline, if Latada personally laid eyes on Yasuke, the only time would be around that date, around the time of the banquet at Ubaguchi. In any case, the date of the entry, close to 3 weeks after Nobunaga dismissed the Ashiguru, Chirchin, and Komono, supports that Yasuke was a full samurai, and either a kosho, as would match his description as a weapon carrier, or umamawari. What he's trying to say here is this dude was kind of a big deal. And in fact, far from just being a regular samurai, might actually have been a much larger big deal than people are willing to talk about. So let's continue to go through here because, oh boy, do we have a lot to go through here. Okay. Question, is samurai a title in the way that high Middle Ages knighthood was? I.e., you formally take part in an accolade and are dubbed knight, or is it more fluid than that? Answer, leaving aside the actual fluidity of the word knight, there was never a formalized requirement of a samuraiing ceremony. At this point in time, a samurai was basically anyone who 1. Went to war armed and ready to fight, 2. Either A. Awarded or inherited an estate with enough income capable of supporting at least a family plus hire followers for war, B. Paid a stipend which was permanent, as in not just for the duration of the task, of about that value. Or C. Had enough property to be some sort of community leader, so could be called upon for war with the followers. In the mid-16th century, the legal privileges of using his family name on official documentations and wearing two swords in public and having these inheritable would be formalized. But that was many decades past Yasuke's time. And even then, there were things a lot more fluid than people realize. So what the dude's saying is basically anyone at war, basically anyone here was a samurai. Everyone keeps saying, oh, he was a retainer, not a samurai. I am very smart. Doesn't actually know this time period. All the historians of this time period are like, look, even if we're totally wrong, even if we're just totally off the base, he would still be a samurai. Like even if they're just horribly wrong and all these people just accidentally keep talking about Yasuke being this big deal, even if that just keeps accidentally happening, even if we have all these historical accounts of everyone talking about him all the time and it all accounts for nothing, even his actions, even the fact he's just receiving a stipend, even the fact he's still at war would still make him a samurai at this point in time in Japanese history. Actual titles were something else entirely, though many samurai of the time liked to self-style said titles, so those not officially recognized and recorded had little value. Looking through the list of names killed at Honnouji and Nijo, like Yasuke, did not have titles, although officially recognized or self-styled, or if they did, they were not known by the titles. What he's saying here additionally, these titles didn't really matter. They didn't really matter, unfortunately. At the end of the day, I think people think that like being a samurai was some big ceremony and you had a title and you got like a name tag, Yasuke, samurai, right? Like, but that's just not how it worked back then. The dude did everything that a samurai does. He was a samurai. There's a reason the Japanese just keep calling him a samurai every time. It's not because like some American dude went over there and like slapped him until they called him a samurai. The Japanese were calling Yasuke a samurai before Americans were even remembering that Yasuke even existed. Yes, he was a samurai. I don't know how the game portrays him, and I don't care. Neither do I. But for sure, samurai was not something glorious or indeed all that rare. It really wasn't. Neither was their lives all it's cut out to be. Everyone's lives sucked in the 16th century Japan. And while there were plenty of non-samurai who tried and became samurai, there were also plenty of samurai who gave up their status and became peasants or merchants. Question. Yasuke is just an irrelevant character not worth mentioning with few historical records. Answer, if I may ask why there's so I think this is still part of the question. If I may ask why there's so few written accounts about Yasuke. So right here we have the question. Yasuke doesn't have many accounts written about him. He's not really written about that much. So why do we care about this little known figure? Answer, Yasuke is mentioned in at least one diary, one chronicle, 3 letters, and one ecclesiastic history. Francis Soliers, who confirms he was from the area of Mozambique and brought to Japan via India. As far as the number of written accounts that mention historical figure goes, that's a lot. In comparison, most of the other Kosho at Honnouji and Nijo who fought and lost their lives, we only know about them because they're mentioned in the Shinko Kochi, or later works that cite or obviously reference it, and many are only mentioned insofar as having their names listed among the dead. An African person becoming a samurai without being documented is ridiculous. Maybe, maybe not. Good thing then Yasuke becoming a samurai was documented. And this is important. There are people who are being called a samurai basically just because they died in a battle. There are people we would call a samurai because they were listed among the dead. The requirements to be listed as a samurai are so low that a dude can just be mentioned, oh yeah, that dude died at this battle too. And we're like, oh, he must have been a samurai. But for Yasuke, the amount like of information needed to call this dude a samurai is insane. Like, you basically, he has a stipend like a samurai, he fights like a samurai, he carries Nobunaga's weapons like a samurai, he's on Nobunaga's side all the time like a samurai. In fact, far from just being a samurai, when all the lower samurai are dismissed and all the officers are only around, he's still there. He's still there with the dude. He doesn't have other people around, but for some reason he has Yasuke, who many call not a samurai, which just doesn't make sense. Either Yasuke was the most charismatic man in all human history who could charm the most powerful man in Japan so much that the dude just kept him around all the time for absolutely no reason, or he might have been a samurai at this point. And it's pretty clear why the missionary wrote back that before, by the way, the missionary wrote before Yasuke even left with Nobunaga. He wrote that he thought Yasuke might become a Tono. Why would he do that? Why would he write that? It doesn't make any sense if there was absolutely nothing. Does a missionary just like writing about slaves becoming Japanese generals? Do they just do that all the time? Of course not. That would be ridiculous. Nobody does that. Why would there be a historical... Why would he possibly do that? So, we have a paragraph here. Yasuke is mentioned in at least one diary, blah, 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 blah. Francis Solis, who confirms, blah, 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 blah. Oh, there's just a source here. Okay, in how many battles has Yasuke fought? Answer, we don't know how much time he spent in Japan because he first appeared in sources at March 27th, 1581, and was last mentioned in June 21st, 1582. So just to be clear, all these mentions of Yasuke, all this talking about Yasuke takes place over a single year. I gotta be clear with that. Some people get mentions like every decade, even if they're important. Some people will have mentions like the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire will get like a note like every, oh yeah, this decade he was doing this, right? But for some reason, Yasuke couldn't go 2 feet without someone commenting like, oh crap, there's Yasuke. Our sources only clearly state him fighting at Nijo Castle. By the way, fighting at all basically automatically makes him a samurai. So the fact he fought at all, he's a samurai. This isn't even up for debate. You'd have to be a simpleton to not understand this. Like you would have to be an actual simpleton to not understand this. Like you would have to be someone who's so just insanely against black people that the very idea of a black samurai fills you with such rage that you are willing to deny reality in your rage. Though it's possible he also fought at Hinoji that morning. That still counts as one though. He followed Nobunaga on the Takeda campaign in 1582, but there's no record of Nobunaga's direct forces engaging in combat. Just to be clear with that again, Nobunaga didn't fight either because that campaign was done. Question, having a fief is required for a samurai. Having a fief is not a requirement for being a samurai, as around the time Yasuke appeared, an increasing number of samurai were employed on stipend. Matsudara's Latada's diary describes him as being under Nobunaga Fuchi. I don't know if Western internet writers mistakenly translate the term as carry, but Fuchi means a rice stipend or a warrior employed by such a stipend. Yasuke was paid a Fuchi. At the very least, Lorenzo Messiah reported that Nobunaga assigned people to show him around Kyoto. Either way would make him a warrior. So in addition to the guy writing the history of Nobunaga, likening him to a samurai, another dude who just happened to write about him also likened him to having a samurai's stipend. So we have two people, both of whom are saying, yeah, it is paid like a samurai. You fight like a samurai, you get paid like a samurai, kind of makes you a samurai. Having a longsword is not a mark of a samurai until the late 17th century, when Edo Bakufu outlawed the wearing of the longsword in public by non-samurai population of the cities. In any case, Louis Froys recorded Yasuke having fought at Nijo where he surrendered his sword, so he had one. So he was definitely a samurai. And considering he was among Nobunaga Nobutada's page's guards, a relatively important one at that. And this is something in the last video I tried to go over this. Look, I don't know how to express this hard enough. When Nobunaga was betrayed and when he was killed, he was at a retreat where he didn't trust anyone with his location. One of his closest people had to betray him for him to get murdered, to get betrayed. Of the 4 people, let me just be clear here, of the 4 people that were with him was Yasuke. Okay, like, again, either this dude is the most charismatic person in all human history who Nobunaga would go through actual withdrawals not being able to talk to him every day, or Yasuke had somehow managed inexplicably, in the most bizarre way, to become one of the most powerful people in Japan, but only for 1 year, of which he was a slave at the beginning and he ended a slave afterwards. But then was one of the most powerful people in Japan for like 1 year. And I don't mean most powerful by owning land, obviously. I don't mean most powerful by any of that. I mean by being one of the right-hand men of the most powerful men in Japan. Anyone who is a right-hand man of one of the most powerful people in Japan is then, therefore, one of the most powerful people in Japan. Okay. Response by a user, I still disagree. He was obviously one of Nobunaga's pages, but that doesn't mean he was a samurai. As I stated, as Sandelbara Toyotomi Hideyoshi was also one of Nobunaga's pages while he was a peasant, a position that would have seen him receive a stipend. The longsword was outlawed for non-samurai in the 16th century when Toyotomi instituted the sword hunt, removing them from possession of all peasantry. Either way, the only explicit reference to Yasuke's sword type is when Nobunaga gifted him a wakizashi, and I don't think it proves anything one way or another from Nobunaga taking an interest in the man Japan, which also explains him being shown around Kyoto. He may have been a samurai, but there's not enough proof to definitely say so. There very much is, and you'd have to literally be closing your eyes and going la 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 while everyone's like, yeah dude, it's pretty much just a historical consensus. Like, this isn't even up for debate. There's not one accredited historian in Japan or America who's saying he's not a samurai. In fact, they're literally everyone who talks about him goes, oh yeah, Yasuke, the samurai. I also think that considering his unique status at the time, if he had been made a samurai, and he wouldn't be made a samurai. Again, this isn't like a samuraiing process. They don't take a hammer and samurai you, okay? They don't like hit you in the chest and, ooh, now you're a samurai. One of the sources would have explicitly stated so, as it would have been unusual, if not unheard of for the Japanese, and probably unheard of for any Western missionaries of the country at the time. Response to this: in general, this term is a term for payment for mid-lower ranking warriors for them to hire, usually warrior, servants for employment. Given the term's usual usage and that Yasuke was clearly by Nobunaga's side in permanent employment, it doesn't make sense for Yasuke to be anything except a warrior. Even if Yasuke was only a page or a weapons bearer, that would make him a warrior on par with Ranmaru, at least before spring of 1582 when Ranmaru received a large feast. In contrast, the Toyo Kagami specifically said that Hideyoshi started out taking care for Nobunaga's shoes when Nobunaga went hunting. When Hideyoshi became a samurai, the term used for Hideyoshi's servants was that term. You seem to be under the impression that a samurai was someone who needed to be officially made one, like knighted. This isn't very accurate for the knight either, but bushi was a social group determined by what one did, not a formal rank or title, meaning Latada describing him as Nobunaga's fuchi, and as it doesn't make sense for Latada to think Nobunaga was someone in a position to be dealing with the hiring of servants himself, Latada's diary is more record of Yasuke being a samurai than many others would get. So what he's saying here is the diary of some random dude describing him fulfilling the role of a samurai. It's like 100% confirmation. Even if you say everything else is circumstantial, even if you say everything else is just non-biased, we're talking about a time period where it's very easy to be a samurai, and the dude is describing Yasuke being a samurai, okay? It would be like if a historical record had someone say, oh man, he's wearing like a light red shirt. It's like red but light. It's like a light red but light, kind of like a rose-ish kind of color, and people going, well, that could be any color, and historians being like, he's probably describing pink, and you being like, yeah, I don't see it. Could Latada be using the term to mean something other than its usual meaning, or just mistaken? Of course, but as far as I know, currently no one has put forward evidence of, or really even argued such. All published authors in English and Japanese pretty much treat Yasuke as a samurai. Lockley goes so far as to say so in the title of his book. The longsword was outlawed for non-samurai in the 16th century when Toyotomi instituted the sword hunt, removing them from the possession of all peasantry. Either way, the only explicit reference to Yasuke's sword type is when Nobunaga gifted him a wakizashi. Very normal thing, by the way, to gift a dude a sword. You just give slaves sword all the time. You just give them swords, like that's just a thing. You're just handing out swords, like, hey, random person I have following me, here's a ceremonial sword. What? You see what I mean? Like, you have to have like brain rot. You have to have cancer to still believe this. And I don't think it proves anything one way or another from Nobunaga taking an interest in the man, which also explains him being shown around Kyoto. Here's the response: sword hunt orders were limited to the countryside peasantry, and in any case was 2 decades after Yasuke's time under Nobunaga. Besides, the word used by the translation of Louis Frau's report is katana. Again, so he's not even saying he was giving a wakizashi, he said, just to be clear, Nobunaga gifted Yasuke a katana, as per Louis Frau's report. Nobunaga, the most powerful man in Japan, gifted Yasuke a katana. He's saying not only is he totally wrong about this sword hunt thing and just totally off base and has no idea what he's talking about, but the dude was gifted a katana. Again, you're having some brain rot to pretend that Yasuke isn't a samurai. Question: he was only a page, squire, retainer, whatever. No, but they were a social class of their own, and the distinction was enough that we have specific mention of Ashigaru, who are not part of the samurai class until the Edo period, being raised to the samurai pass. Okay, so he's responding to this where people are saying, well, he wasn't a samurai, he was a page, he was a squire, he was a retainer, he was something else. He wasn't a samurai, he was these things, he was a retainer. He says this symbol, page, squire, aide, bodyguard, was a full samurai. So he's saying even if you said he's a retainer, even if you said that, you would still be clarifying he's a samurai. So you just played yourself. Even if you're saying he wasn't a samurai, he was a retainer. During this time period, a retainer would have been a samurai. FYI, no source says that Yasuke was actually this symbol, which was a specific job title. The assumption is if he really was a weapons bearer, as supposedly recorded in the Maeda clan version of the Chronicles of Lord Nobunaga, he would most likely be a this symbol. Unfortunately, the relevant dates of the Maeda clan version are not available in the National Archives of Japan Digital Archive, so I can't check, but I don't have a reason to doubt it. So he's saying, even if it was true that he was merely... We're going multi-drifting here. Even if you're saying he was a retainer, then he was a samurai, but also he wasn't called a retainer. So even if you're saying he was a retainer, he's a samurai, but he wasn't called a retainer. Do you guys grasp that? Like, the dude's basically, all these people are basically making shit up and saying he was called a retainer when he wasn't called a retainer. As for the report Louis Freud uses, if I remember correctly, it describes the sword given to Yasuke as a short ceremonial katana, implying, to me at least, it was a wakizashi, as you have to question whether a foreign priest would see much difference beyond their length. Again, there is room for disagreement. Freud says no such thing, so once again, he's saying the dude's lying, and just says nothing. Most likely, remember Wikipedia cough, which record that in Maeda clan version of the Chronicles of Lord Nobunaga, Yasuke was given a koshi katana, just another name for wakizashi. Not sure who translated his short ceremonial katana in English during his first meeting with Nobunaga in the spring of 1581. So what he's saying right here, even what he's saying right here is that the dude is bringing up a Wikipedia article which used a poor English translation. And he's literally basing his article on a Wikipedia article which likely used Google Translate and then said, aha, this is my proof. I already linked and translated the relevant section of Lois Fry's letter in the thread above. Even in the original Portuguese, Foyce uses the term katana, spelled katana. So can we possibly find this? Because I'm gonna be real with you. I am not gonna find this. Spelled katana. I'm gonna be real with you. I don't think this website will even. No, there's zero hits for this because this is a large document, and this is not translated. I have tried to read this, just to be clear. There are multiple pages here. You might notice I'm going through different pages. These are all here. And I mean, we're talking about original Portuguese translations, okay? I'm a bit out of my element here. First, breakdown of the history about Yasuke and why he was a samurai, miscellaneous. Here are all written accounts of Yasuke I can find. Bear with me because all of them I'm translating from Japanese. So these aren't all the written accounts. There are more out there, but these are only the ones that he can translate right now, as of literally responding to people right now. And he's accounting for these. So remember, normal people at this time period would have 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 mentions. More than that, you're probably a big deal. Let's go over how much are on Yasuke. And again, these are only the ones he has directly translated and have linked right now. Directly translated and linked. 2nd of May, 23rd day. A black monk came from the Christian countries. He looks about 26 to 7 of age, and his entire body black as cow. His body is really well built, and furthermore, he has a strength of over 10 men. The Padre brought him here to see Lord Nobunaga. I'm really grateful to be able to see such rare things among 3 countries that's never been seen before, and in such detail. All thanks to Lord Nobunaga's great influence. Letter from Louis Francis. The Monday after Easter, Nobunaga was in the capital, but a great number of people gathered in front of our casa to see the Kafre black slave. I don't know if that's an offensive term. Maybe I should avoid saying it. Creating such a ruckus that people were hurt and almost died from thrown rocks. Even though we had lots of guards at the gates, it was difficult holding people from breaking it down. They all say if we showed for money, one would easily earn in a short time 8,000 to 10,000 cruzado. Nobunaga also wanted to see him, and so sent for him. So Padre Argentino brought him. With great fuss, he couldn't believe that this was the natural color and not by human means. So ordered him to take off all his clothes above his belt. Nobunaga's sons also called him over, and everyone was very happy. Nobunaga's nephew, the current commander of Osaka, also saw this and was happy to give him 10,000 coins. I'm not really sure why they just gave him 10,000 coins for being black, but I mean, I don't really get that one, but that's what's recorded. It's not like we can go ask the dude. I'd like to know. I'd really like to know. The dude proved he was actually black, and they're like, shit, here's 10,000 coins. That sounds like a lot to me, but I don't know. This is all that's written here about this event. Why did this happen? I don't know. The Padre brought one Caffre with him, and no one in the capital has seen before, and they all admired him, and countless people came to see him. Nobunaga himself saw and was surprised, and thought it was painted with ink, and did not believe he was black from birth. He see him from time to time and knew some Japanese, so he never got tired of talking to him, and he was strong and knew some tricks, so Nobunaga was very happy. Now he's his strong patron, and to let everyone know, he has a summon shogo with him around the city. The people say Nobunaga would make him a tono. So to be clear here, that would be Japanese word for lord or sir. So the thing is, we have multiple accounts from multiple people, kind of about like this is Lorenzo Mencia, and this is from Louis Frois. So they're both kind of describing what's happening here. And what you might be able to understand is if multiple people are kind of describing the same thing, then yeah. So this is from a later date. And this guy was describing Nobunaga meeting him. This guy describing this months later, that Nobunaga is now his, quote, strong patron. And that the people say Nobunaga will make him a tono. So this missionary dude is like, man, the Japanese people, they're saying they're going to make him a lord. They're going to make Yasuke a lord. This is written. Now, I wonder if I can actually... I probably... if I had to guess, I will be unable to read this. Potentially, I might not be able to read this one. Once again, I might not be able to for myself verify this for reasons. Okay. Matsudara's Latada's diary, 19th May 11th, 1582, day of TB, raining. His Highness gave him a stipend. They say the Jesuits presented him. He had the black man with him. His body was black like ink, 8.2 feet tall. They say his name's Yasuke. So once again, we have another dude just totally unrelated, just sort of talking about Yasuke, being like, Nobunaga gave him a stipend. So what do you think? What do you think? Anyone in the comments want to talk about this? So we have multiple people talking about Yasuke in multiple different perspectives, okay? We have Louis Frois report to the Jesuit Society again, and the Caffre, the Visitador, gave to Nobunaga on his request. After his death, went to the mansion of his heir and fought there a long time. But when one of Akechi's vassals got close and asked him to give him his sword, he handed it over. The vassals went and asked Akechi what to do with the Caffre. He said the Caffre is like an animal and knows nothing, and he's not Japanese, so don't kill him and give him to the church of the Indian Padre. With this, we were a bit relieved. So, by the way, they're expressing relief. They actually say it more so, but they're expressing relief that Yasuke didn't die. He's also saying that this is where we know Nobunaga didn't just leave, or sorry, Yasuke didn't just leave after Nobunaga died. Nobunaga got killed, and Yasuke went to the heir of Nobunaga, his son, and then he fought there. And he fought until the battle was lost, at which point the Japanese did not kill him, at which point he went back to the church. We know that. We know that from this. So, for some reason, they are relieved, which, I'm going to be honest with you, it's very bizarre the way they talk about him. Now, to be clear, there is something I want to clear up that some people haven't talked about very much. People say that the Jesuits did not believe in slavery, which is technically true, but also this guy very clearly had a slave. So, like, what are you going to do? You know what I mean? Like, what are you going to do? Just wanted to say that real quick. Okay. So all we know about him is that he was probably the first African in central Japan and aroused great interest from all the Japanese. And by the way, there's more quotes. Obviously, we've gone over more of them as I've showed you. It's just these are ones right now that he's translating and showing to you. Okay. So all we know about him is he's probably the first African in central Japan and aroused great interest from all the Japanese. He was big, healthy, strong, knew some performance tricks, and learned some Japanese. He was a slave of the Jesuits, but Nobunaga took a liking to him, and the Jesuits gave him to Nobunaga. Nobunaga liked him so much he was given a stipend, so he was definitely made a samurai. After Nobunaga's death at Honnoji, he went to Nijo Castle to protect Oda Nobutada and fought bravely, but it was all for naught, and he was captured and handed over to the Jesuits. Nothing else is known about him. Nothing else is known about him. I gotta be clear about this. In addition to the few sources I've shown over the course of all this, let me be clear here for a second. He disappears from history at this point. It is very likely he just became a slave again, which is why his story is so sad. Because the dude was a slave, seemed to, at the very least, put the best out. He doesn't seem to have been beaten or anything that we know of, but he was still a slave. Okay, he did his best. He met the most powerful man in Japan and served him faithfully for 1 year, at which point he fought until he was killed, fought with his son until his son was killed, and then was given back to the Jesuits, where it is very likely he just became a slave again. That's what we know about him, and that's all we can know about him, because it's not like more history is going to be written. We probably have all the letters, we probably have all the information about him. And as I start to wrap this up, I just want to be clear with you guys, okay? People don't get written about this much. They really, really don't. A lot of times, people can get mentioned, or we can correlate facts, and we can kind of, like see what a dude was doing, what a dude was probably doing. We can see other people maybe write about them, but it's highly unusual in a single year, in 1 year, for a dude to be talked about this many times and this often, okay? You're not going to see other slaves talked about this much. You're not going to see people who didn't become a big deal talked about this much. We know for a fact he had a stipend. We know for a fact that people wrote that he was potentially going to be a lord. We know for a fact that he acted like he was some sort of high, powerful lord. We know for a fact that other people who were 100% definitely samurais, who had the same stipend given to them, who were at Nobunaga's side when he died, those same people that we would 100% consider samurai had the same stipend, the same bringing up as Yasuke. So to say he's not a samurai, to try to make light of this story, to try to win some culture war, is pure lunacy. It's idiocy. It's stupidity. Now, obviously, I don't take credit for this Reddit post. I don't take credit for any of the things put here. But all I want to say, as I close this video, stop being morons. Stop writing me hateful messages because I put up a video where I was just excited people were talking about Yasuke, okay? You guys are stupid, and you're trying to ruin a cool thing to try to win some stupid culture war. Okay, nothing you do, nothing you say can stop or disprove that Yasuke was a samurai. I know it might piss you off, I know it might annoy you, but many people throughout history have excellent stories. Many people throughout history have fantastical stories, and I assure you, we don't really dispute it just because they're black. Richard the Lionheart is well regarded to have actually run up to the Muslim battle lines and challenged basically the entire army to a fight. We know that. We know that because the Muslim chroniclers recorded it. But only one Muslim chronicler recorded it. Should he have been fact-checked? Should 7 people have been behind him also writing about it at the same time? No, one person wrote about it, so we think, oh, that's really bizarre. And yet we have so many people writing about Yasuke. We have so many people saying, yeah, this dude's a samurai. And yet people go, well, no, he can't be. There can't be a black samurai. That would be too cool. And that's the thing. He's a cool dude. He had 1 year. He had 1 year, and he did all this in 1 year. And that's what makes his story so appealing. And that's why we get so many Japanese articles written about this dude. That's why we get the story of Yasuke, the Black Samurai, because it's super weird and it's super cool and it's just super out there and people don't really know how this happened. The mystery is part of what makes it cool. You can kind of think to yourself, what happened here? We'll never know. History doesn't continue to write. We got what we got, and unless we find a stash of letters where someone says, oh man, it would be super funny if we just made up a whole bunch of shit about this random dude, then pretended to send letters about it so we could trick people in 500 years. Unless that comes out, we pretty much know Yasuke was a samurai. So, thank you for watching. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, everybody. And as always, have a great rest of your day.